Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Ego Chall Podcast, a Call of Duty esports podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're going to be covering Stage 4, Week 2 of the Call of Duty League, which included a rather disappointing performance from the Seattle Surge, which is obviously not that surprising if you've been listening to our recent episodes, as well as two losses from the Los Angeles Thieves. And later in the show, we're going to talk about Stage 4, Week 3, the final week of possibly of online group play. We don't really know, but at least this will be the last time we see online for about 3 weeks. So, how you doing, Bink?
I'm alright. Was a little chalked earlier, but as Trem would say, pop stem, and I'll be good to go for this.
It's never
Ready to
chalked,
talk some Call of Duty.
as a wise person once said, it's never chalked, even though the old podcast name would have indicated otherwise. So let's start off with Stage 4 Week 2 matches. We had some pretty interesting matchups on day one, at least in the back half, in my opinion. But two pretty convincing results in both of these matches. The Atlanta FaZe swept the Seattle Surge, and the Dallas Empire swept the best team in the Call of Duty League despite their record, the Los Angeles Guerrillas. What do you think of these two matches?
This was a pretty quick day. I'm pretty sure both of these matches were done before you even started your shift at work. So, yeah. It was real quick. I mean, we kind of talked about, I'm pretty sure it was at least on the last episode, we were talking about not being too sure about what to expect from Dallas, right? Like, we felt like, obviously you picked Guerrillas, and I was like kind of on the fence, whereas I was seeing as it was a match either team could have won. But obviously, this was kind of a revenge match for Vivid, first time playing against his former team, and although he wasn't necessarily the player of the series, he still played his role and helped Dallas get the dub they needed.
Yeah, so that's a big win for Dallas, not only for Vivid just to get that revenge win like you said, but also just because they haven't had many great performances since benching Hook. And I wouldn't say that LAG they're not the worst team, because we'll get to that, but they are one of the worst teams, and this is a much needed win. If you lose this match, then you're almost certainly going to start in the losers bracket, and it's going to be a hard major for you. As for Seattle, that may be the worst team. They lose to FaZe 3-0, and that makes 9 consecutive match losses and 9 consecutive control losses in a row for Seattle. Their last win in control or in a match was against Florida at the Stage 2 major. So they went the entirety of Stage 3 without a win, and it's looking like they may go the entirety of Stage 4 without a win. They still have a few matches, obviously including group stage and the major, but they haven't had great performances against anybody really. So it's what do you think of this? Like, is there a solution for this team at this point?
Solution to what end? Aren't we talking about making champs? Or?
Yeah, because I don't think that many teams have a real good chance of winning champs, because really like the top 5 teams are the real contenders. But yeah, to get out of the bottom 4 to even qualify for champs, what is the solution if there is one?
I don't think they're 100 points back of Florida, and Florida's in 8th place right now, so I really don't think there is. I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, I think now. Maybe it was after the whole Decimate situation with them leaving or them parting ways, however you want to word it. When we were talking about Censor, right? Like, even to me, before these last couple of weeks transpired, I felt like Seattle was in a position where they just weren't really going to be competing. I think they were in too big of a hole to try and get into the top 8 for champs, and obviously that hole has increased now. But even back then, it seemed like they were facing a very uphill battle since they were in last place in the standings. And I know other people in the community, but I was thinking, if Seattle got a guy like Censor, even if he doesn't perform well, they're still going to have people watching their games, and It would have been good for interaction, stuff like that. So I mean, that's when I was thinking, even before all these last couple of matches have happened, and now they're just at this point, like you said, all the losing streaks and whatnot. It's just they're not in a good spot, and I really don't know if there's anything they can do to salvage the season.
Yeah, they were one of the first teams that at least we were talking about maybe making a roster change earlier in the season because they did start off so slow. And at the time, Pristini was underperforming, at least relative to the rest of the team. And I mean, at that point, it's like, do you make this move now or do you wait maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, see if anything improves, and then make a change if you need to at that point? But there have been certain times in the season where Seattle has looked, I wouldn't say good, but say decent or average because they have performed, at times like where you think they would. Stage two, they got two group stage wins, one over Florida, one over Paris. They went to game 5 with Dallas, went to game 5 with Minnesota as well, and they even won a game or a match at the major, and then they lost to Optic in the stage 2 major. But since then, they've been, well, they haven't won, so obviously they haven't been very good. And it's just, I don't really know. Maybe it's just poor roster construction again, like last season where people, I mean, I know they debated this on the flank maybe a month and a half ago, but some people were trying to say that everybody thought that Seattle roster would be good at the beginning of the Call of Duty League season, which I don't know if that's very accurate because when I looked at the roster, I didn't think it was very good. So I don't know if it's just they can't seem to construct a roster or what the issue is there.
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, obviously the results speak for themselves. Like, the roster isn't performing, and then
Yeah.
they're in last place. Like, nothing you can say about that. But obviously, I think the guys they have on that team are all talented. Like, you would think from a talent perspective, having Octane and Gunless on the same team would work well. But obviously, just something isn't clicking. And like you said, maybe there's something to that extent where I can't remember where I saw, if it was on Twitter or somebody was talking about on the flank or something, but maybe it's like saying something where like you can't have Octane and Gunless both in the same team. Like in this game, Gunless might be a main AR. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but that just like brings up the point in my head that like something just obviously isn't working for Seattle, and it doesn't necessarily mean the players aren't talented. Like you have guys like Mike Trout in the MLB playing on bad teams, but that doesn't mean he's not talented. So, yeah. I mean, you can have good players on bad teams, but something's just not going right for Seattle, and they got good players, but it's a bad team.
Yeah, and that's the same story from last year because they had Karma, who's one of the best Call of Duty players of all time, Apathy, one of the best submachine gun players of all time. They had, obviously, Octane is still there, so he's like the holdover from last season to this season, and he is considered to be one of the greatest ARs of all time. And I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know. Like, I know that we've spoke a lot of, or I don't know a lot about on air, but we've talked about how Octane isn't considered to be the greatest search player, like a great respawn AR, but not the greatest search player. But if that's the case, and I think he has really good stats in search. Obviously, stats aren't everything, but he has decent stats, so it's obviously, Classic, who they just picked up, has some of the worst search stats in the entire league. So it's kind of like, how are you building this team? Like, what is this team building to? Are you trying to win searches consistently, or are you more focused like, okay, we're going to win these respawns. Like, if we're a really good hardpoint team, we can get 1 and 4. And then it's just about getting, either one of those searches or getting control, which has been a really big point of contention for them because at this point, with this loss, they lost 9 straight controls. They have the worst control record. I believe they won 3 all season, so I believe they're like 3-19 or something right now. Like it's really bad. So I don't know. Like I I I interviewed Nubsy last year after I believe it was the Enable debacle where it was like, is he in or is he out? And I felt bad for Nubsy because he was getting a lot of blame from people like he's Bill Belichick or something, that he's able to unilaterally make these moves. But I don't know. I just don't know what the solution is for this team long term. I know maybe Octane probably won't be there next year, or he might. I don't know, but there's no guarantee there.
We don't know what Seattle's going to do next year, obviously, and there's been plenty of questions around like their willingness to sign amateur talent and stuff like that as far back as last year during the season.
Yeah.
But I think a quote unquote solution. I still don't think Seattle is going to make champs. They're just in too deep of a hole. But for the short term, what I would like to see them do, I don't think they're going to do this, but I would like to see them do, is take a shot on just, some of these amateur players. Like, the reaction to benching someone like Octane probably wouldn't be good, and so they probably wouldn't go down that route. But just as an example, if they like sign a young amateur player, I'm not even gonna name a name, but if they just sign an amateur player and bench somebody on the current roster, and or even if they benched all 4 people on the current roster and signed 4 amateurs to 2-week contracts for stage 5 group play, just to see what they can do, right? That would be something interesting. Like I said, I do not think that's going to happen just based off of, I don't think any team would do that, let alone Seattle, just based on their history with, rumors and stuff of them not wanting to make moves like that, regardless of, short-term, long-term, whatever. But that would be interesting if any team was willing to do it. And I think Seattle is in the position where they could do that if they actually wanted to. But again, I don't think they will. And long term, I don't know what they do. I feel like Octane is gonna wanna get a fresh start somewhere else. These have been 2 bad seasons for him, right? So like, it would make sense to me if he went elsewhere, depending on his contract situation. Obviously, we don't know for sure. So does maybe Seattle build around Gunless? That would be interesting. I think that was brought up on the flank or somewhere else. I'm not really remembering, but that could be an interesting prospect. Or they just, blow it up and start from scratch. I don't know if Seattle has like a public GM. I'm not even sure if we know who the GM of Seattle is. So, I guess we're just going to have to wait till the offseason to find out. But, yeah, obviously, things aren't going well for Seattle right now. The season kind of is, at this point, those players are basically playing for personal stock, I feel like, just to, try and prove that they're all talented veterans. Christini's a world champion, Octane, Gunless, both MVP caliber players in classics like that roll glue guy. So, they're guys you expect to see in the CDL and probably go their separate ways next year and piece something together elsewhere. I'm not really sure, but to me, I think that's the long-term answer for Seattle, is they gotta just try something fresh in 2022.
So let's move on to these next 2 matches. On Friday, we had the Los Angeles Thieves versus the Paris Legion, and the New York Subliners versus the Florida Mutineers. So let's start at the top. LAT versus Paris. Paris coming in had not won since May 2nd, and they had only had 1 win with Temp in their lineup, who joined them prior to Stage 3. So they win this. They win 3-1 over the Thieves. This makes, I believe, the first loss with the Thieves with TJ back in the lineup, because I think they only played 1 last week, and they played 2 this week. So I believe that they're at this point 1-1 with TJ. Paris.
Oh, since the Who situation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So
they're 1-2 in Group A.
Yeah, but they lost
before the. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And this is notable for Paris because Aqua is on the AR, Scraps on the sub, and they come out with a win, very much needed win, and a pretty surprising one. I didn't think that the Thieves they didn't look incredible last week. I think they had a 5-game series with Seattle, but so not incredible. But I obviously didn't think Paris would be able to come out with a win. What do you think of Paris's win here?
Yeah, I think that was the most notable thing, kind of like you mentioned at the top. Shout out Crown, obviously, in the chat. But he posted on CDL, there's that clip of Aqua, and obviously it turned out he wasn't being too serious. But, last week we talked about him potentially going to a sub role, and, we touched on all that, him playing sub in the past, and Paris's history so far this year of, making role changes before making roster changes, etc. But it turns out it could have been due to the maps or something, but we saw Aqua in this series primarily using the AR while Scraps was on the SMG. So it was Aqua and Temp on the ARs with Scraps and Zapdius on the subs. So that was, it's obviously a bit of a switch because I think, we've seen Scraps and Temp keep going back and forth on who's running that second AR. But regardless, it seems like that's what they're working with right now. Obviously, this week things could change again. I don't really know, but this was a big win, like you said. I don't think many people expected Paris to take this one over the Thieves, but they got the job done.
So with this win, they were 2-7 with Temp. So through the first 9 matches since the beginning of Stage 3, only 2 wins for Paris. Just a really big win. They're very much likely not going to be in the upper bracket of the Stage 4 major bracket, but wins are wins. 10 CDL points are always useful, and at this point it's more just a confidence booster because they had played, I wouldn't say like the worst Call of Duty I've ever seen, but they were very much not on the same level they were even at earlier in the season, before they made the move, and they still had Classic and everything. So really impressed by Paris. And then this New York-Florida series, this was a really big one because Florida had looked really good coming into this match. They had played really well throughout the beginning stages of Stage 4. New York, since they brought in Hydra, they've looked to be really good. They just finished second at the Stage 3 major. And they come out with a win. They come back and they win 3-2. What do you make of New York's win over Florida here?
Yeah, I thought this was a really great match. I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I said on the last episode that this was going to be the match of the week, just based off, Florida was coming out that upset over Toronto in the previous week, and they were looking strong. And obviously, New York has done well recently, like you said, since adding Hydra. So I had high expectations for this matchup, and I wasn't disappointed. All the maps were super close if, we look at the individual map scores. But the biggest thing for me here was that New York actually won both Search and Destroys. Florida, we like you just said, New York's been really good at hardpoint. That's been documented. And Florida was able to steal map 1, 250, 234. New York takes standoff 6-3, and then Florida wins raid control 3-2. So New York backs against the wall, down 1-2. They take checkmate hardpoint 250, 228, and express search 6-2. So really close series on paper, and it was an exciting one to watch. Let me pull up the stats real quick from Breaking Point. If we look, Skies had the highest KD in the series overall with a 1.28. Nobody else. Neptune went 99.95, so he had a 1 KD. But this is another situation where Awakening wasn't necessarily humongous wake. He dropped to 0.95. But Florida was still able to get the job done and, not get the job done. I don't know what I'm saying. But situation there where I guess we've talked about Awakening needing to pop off for Florida to win, and that wasn't the case here. Kind of put my foot in my mouth, but and then for New York, Mac and Hydra, Mac had a 1.08 and Hydra had a 1.04. So nothing, necessarily absurd there in a stats perspective, but I guess that's to be expected when two of the maps that New York is winning those searches, so that's not necessarily like a KD generator
Yeah.
when you only got one life per round. So, um, regardless of me messing up there in the segment, I really did enjoy this series, and it'll be an interesting one if we look at the standings real quick. I don't think did either of these teams play Florida and New York both played again, so I'll touch on that later. But will be interesting to see how this group shakes up because this was basically um the match for first place at that time in the group, just because both of those teams were undefeated and Florida had upset Toronto. So it was an important match, and New York got the win, but it was really close one, went down to the wire, and I enjoyed it.
At the very least, you could say this is basically a tiebreaker match because there's a good chance that out of New York, Florida, and Toronto, that at least two of these teams will tie for first at the top, and there will need to be some tiebreaker involved to decide which team is first, which team is second, which team is third going into the major. And with a win here, New York, I mean, they still have to deal with Toronto, and that's going to be a really tough match. But this definitely helps them. For Florida, if they had won this, I mean, did they play Toronto later in the week, or did they already? Yeah, so they had already beaten Toronto, and
Yeah.
I mean, just beating New York and Toronto in your group, and Dallas hasn't looked the greatest, and London and LAG aren't really anything special either. So a win here would have been gigantic for them. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. But they still show that they're improving, and that maybe a few months ago, consistently, I don't think that they could have hung with a team like New York at this level right now. So kudos to both teams. A really great match, and I'm excited to maybe see a rematch in the major because a big wake goes off, and he's humongous wake or walloping wake or whatever they're trying to call him. He's an absolute weapon on the map. So just going to be interested to see what comes of that. On Saturday, we had three matches. Toronto versus London, Optic versus Paris, and the Minnesota Rocker versus the aforementioned Seattle Surge. Starting at the top, Toronto, they sweep London. Really no surprise there from us because we both predicted that Toronto would win this. For Optic, they win 3-1 against Paris, who had just won the previous day. Paris was unable to string together wins. And Minnesota, they beat Seattle, who lost 2 days prior. So nothing real surprising coming out of this day. Are there any particular things that you're thinking about coming out of Saturday? I know that you said that you were busy most of the day because of a wedding or something, but from the limited time that you were able to tune in, what do you think?
I was at the Yankees game, not a wedding.
Yankees game.
But regardless,
more important actually.
No, so like you said, I think that Toronto 3-0, nothing we really have to touch on there. The Moscow Surge was 6-5. I think that round 11, I saw the clip on CDL Twitter. It was like a longer offensive round where Toronto made like a blind read on London rotating the bomb, and Bance went through A bricks there and got a nice play to seal the deal for them. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward series for Toronto. You expect them to take down a team like London in convincing fashion like that. Looking at the Optic versus Paris matchup, this is like I guess the only thing that really stands out to me is that Optic was able to win the search. And they've looked better at search aside from their stint where they were struggling just overall. Regardless in search, but recently they've looked a little better in search, in my opinion, and maybe that has something to do with standoff. But regardless, they win this standoff 6-2, and I just think that's noticeable because we saw, I believe it was the week before, Paris went 0-2 and they lost all three respawn, but they won both searches. So technically, Paris was playing well in search with Zaptius. This might have actually been their first search loss with Zaptius because they beat the the Thieves search, right?
Pretty sure they
Yeah,
were
so
2
I
and
think
0.
this was yeah, so I think this was technically their first search loss with Zaptius on team. So I guess that's noticeable, but in typical Optic fashion, they win both hard points, so nothing else to really take away there. And then Minnesota versus Surge. Seattle does win map 1 hard point, but after that, Minnesota took care of business. Another control loss for Seattle, and yeah, just nothing else to really say about Seattle, I guess.
Yeah,
Kind of beat that earlier.
yeah, that makes it 10 in a row. So not great. I don't know if it's been confirmed or anything, but was it Tactical Rab that said that this tied the league record for most consecutive match losses? Because I saw somebody tweet out on Saturday after this match that Seattle had tied the original record for most match losses, which I don't really know who would have owned that record. I mean, Seattle would be a definite contender for that, but I feel like I don't know, like it would had to been one of those bottom 4 teams, and it definitely wasn't Optic Gaming, I would assume. So it's maybe it is Seattle. Maybe they tied their own record for most consecutive losses. Either way,
I'm scrolling.
yeah. So either
It
way,
wasn't
though,
Tactical Rab, I just went.
all right. I
Sorry.
don't. Maybe it was Crone. But I remember seeing
Oh.
it. I didn't actually, like fact check it because I was just like, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, just really disappointing. I mean, yeah. So it was Crone at Intel Call of Duty. He tweeted on Saturday, Seattle Surge are on a 10-match losing streak, which ties the all-time CDL record held by the Minnesota Rocker. Surge haven't won a series since April 9th. They've won 4 series this season. So that would make sense. Minnesota really did have a down point last year after they transitioned to online, where they completely fell off a cliff. So makes sense. Man, it doesn't really get like, I mean, the next match they have is against Optic. So I would say there's a better than 50% chance that the Seattle Surge become the first team to win 11 straight or to lose 11 straight matches, and they play Paris to close out stage 4 group play, and who knows, maybe they'll get to 12. I don't know if they're going to try to go rest of the season without winning, but something to keep your eye out for. Let's move on to these final 3 matches of the week. On Sunday we had Florida versus London, Optic versus no, I'm literally about to repeat everything. Florida versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas, the Atlanta FaZe versus the Los Angeles Thieves, and the New York Subliners versus the Dallas Empire. Starting at the top, LAG, they fall again. They fall to 0-3 in Stage 4 group play as Florida picks up their 3rd win of the stage. I mean, I predicted the Guerrillas would win with my heart, but my brain is much smarter than my heart, and Florida came out with the win. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the match, but you predicted Florida to win, so if you want to go ahead and gloat about it.
I don't think there's anything to really gloat about here. I felt like that was an easier one, unless you're in the Gorillas as winning champs crowd like yourself. But
Dozens
other
of
than
us.
that, I mean, just heading into this week, we knew that Florida versus New York match was going to be a tough one, but Florida was coming off of the week of them beating Toronto, so just based off that recent result, we were expecting, or I was expecting Florida to be able to beat the Gorillas here, and that's what they did. I think we mentioned it in the Dallas versus Gorillas one last week, where we thought maybe Gorillas could win the searches off of Dallas to win that match. Obviously, that's not what happened there. And in this case, Florida also won the search against Gorillas. The only map the Gorillas won was Garrison Control 3-0. I actually think that was a really quick one. They might have even won 2 offenses, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong on that, but it was a really quick control. But other than that, Florida, the hard points were close. Moscow hard point was 250-235, and Raid was 250-216. I think Florida had like a big lead on Raid, and then Gorillas put together like a late charge, but Florida was able to close things out. But regardless, this is, at least for me, the expected result.
Yeah, in this Atlanta Thieves series, I mean, I don't know. Like, what can you really say about the Thieves at this point? I mean, I don't think a lot of people were expecting them to necessarily win this match because it is FaZe, and I mean that's the biggest talking point here is just that FaZe are absolutely disgusting at Call of Duty. But the Thieves, this wouldn't be nearly as big of a result if they hadn't lost to Paris earlier in the week, because losing to Paris on top of losing to FaZe gives you 2 losses in the group, and I believe that they don't have particularly easy matches still to go. Let me look real quick. So they play Minnesota and they play Optic in the last week. Those are, I mean, that's different if you were playing like, Surge in Paris and you were 1-2 going into the final week. So I mean, it's just I'm kind of surprised that they made the move to put TJ back in, and it hasn't paid immediate dividends. And what do you think? Do you think there's something to worry about from that aspect, that they are 1-2 in group play now with TJ?
I think, heading into this group, I believe I said it for both groups because we weren't really expecting Florida to be necessarily in this position where they're already 3-1. But regardless, I think when we were talking about the groups for stage 4, in my head it was like clear-cut Group A. FaZe and Optic should be those top 2 teams in Group A.
Yeah.
Group B, I had like Toronto and Subliners as the top 2 teams in Group B, but then like that third spot in each group was kind of up in the air to me. And I think I gave like Florida the edge just because we had Dallas making the change, and Gorilla and London necessarily didn't look the best, even though Gorillas had those close series that didn't go their way in Game 5. But regardless, in Group A, it was kind of in my head between the Thieves and Rocker, and with them making this change now for TJ going back in for Hook, and their current situation, they're gonna have to beat. They're not going up against 2 last place teams, like you said. They're gonna have to beat 2 potential winners bracket teams in their group if they themselves want to get into the winners bracket. So it's definitely a huge week for them, where they're gonna have to show everybody what they're capable of, if this was the right move or not. And if they go 0-2 this week, it could be catastrophic. I don't really know where they would go from there. I don't think we would necessarily see them go back to Hook. That would just be a mess from like a PR standpoint, in my opinion. So I don't really know. I don't really know what direction they're going to go in. Obviously, the match against FaZe was just a stomp. Like you said, the thing that stuck out to me the most was the 6-0 on Raid Search. FaZe has looked good in Search since adding Tupac, but that was just, 6-0s are fun for an S&D guy like me. So that was just brutal, but yeah, I guess like you said, nothing crazy. Like, I don't think many people would have expected the Thieves to be FaZe in this match. Maybe some people might have expected it to be a little bit more competitive. But regardless, they're in the situation now where they're 1-2. They got to beat, 2 good teams if they want to like control their own destiny in a sense, and have to give themselves the best shot to be in winners bracket. Like, even if they go 1-1, there would have to be some tiebreaker scenarios and such that would have to they would need outside help to get into a winners bracket spot for the LAN. But otherwise, they're kind of, it's looking like the Thieves might start from the losers bracket at the first LAN in over a year. And we did see them go on that miracle run in stage 2 major, so something like that could happen, but you can't really bank on that. So gonna have to keep our eyes on the Thieves moving forward.
And the final match of the week was New York versus Dallas. A few months ago, Dallas seemed to have New York's number. They beat them, I believe, in a reverse sweep in the first meeting in the Stage 1 major, or I believe that was Stage 1 group play. Either way, I think Dallas won the first 2 or 3 matchups between these teams. Obviously, a lot has changed since then, not only the rosters, but just how well they've been performing. New York, we talked about it last week, we talked a little bit about it this week, but they look to be one of the best teams in the league at this point. And Dallas, despite a pretty dominant win earlier in the week, this is not the same Dallas that we saw in Stage 1 when they were going up against FaZe, or even Stage 2 when I believe they got 4th at the major. But they really gave New York all they could handle. They nearly take this one, but they fall in 5 games, so a 3-2 win for New York. What are your takeaways from the final game of Week 2?
I think it was closer than a lot of people expected.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on recent performances. I don't think many people would have expected it to be this close, but it's a similar. It kind of mirrors New York's other matchup against Florida in this week. They go down 1-2 and they win the last 2 maps to clutch up. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think I was seeing stuff on Twitter and maybe even the broadcast. They mentioned guys like Hydra being sick, maybe even Clay was sick. I can't really remember, but and we talked about on the last week the visa situation with ASIM, even though that obviously doesn't affect his online play. There could be some small stuff going on behind the scenes that might have affected New York in some way. Obviously, it's impossible for us to know.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, they still get the job done, and they get a 3-2 win, but it was definitely closer than some people might have expected. But it's a good sign in this match, unlike the Florida match. New York gets back to winning their hard points. Obviously, they won one hard point against Florida in both searches, but in this one they win 2 hard points and game 5 search. So that was interesting. But looking at the matches, the map scores, they were all close maps. So I guess that's something we can take away. If you combine, even though Dallas loses this one, you take these close maps and their win over LAG could be signs of Dallas turning a corner. I know there was memes on Twitter too of like Buzzcut Shotzi or whatever, so maybe MVP Shotzi's coming back. I don't really know, but definitely we're gonna have to see how Dallas continues to improve. I think they only have one match this final week, and I believe it's against Florida. Let me look real quick. Yeah, they just have one match left in Group 4 Stage 4 group play. And it's on Saturday against Florida, so that'll be an interesting match.
We would also, we should mention how well Mac played in this, because in the series he became this was the 6th time a player has dropped 20,000 or more damage in a series this season. So Crone tweeted it. He had a nice little graphic. So obviously Mac was the 6th player to do it. He had 21,111 damage over 5 maps. And Clayster, apparently, of the 6 times, he's done it 3. So, I mean, he may be 40, but Gunny 18, as he would like to say. Just an incredible series. You dropped 40 in both hard points, so 80 total hard point kills for Mac in this series, which honestly, like, his performance is basically the difference between a win and a loss. Like, had he played even, average, like, there's a very good chance that Dallas comes out of, either one of those with a win, considering they're within 40 points of both games. ASIM also had 37 kills in the second hard point. So just an incredible performance from Mac, which is, even more incredible considering he, at one time, not too long ago, was being reported as being benched for sibilance, right? Like, they were thinking of bringing in Sib into the lineup and benching him, or sending him to the academy team or whatever. So just an incredible performance from him. Super excited, because he did struggle early on in the season, and maybe Hydra coming in the lineup really just helped him find his groove.
Real quick, I think we'll be able to talk about it more when we get to our preview for the major, but we still haven't really seen Mac play on LAN in the Pro League, right? Since he was added by New York post-COVID last year when when the league transitioned to online play. His entire professional career has been in online, so I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to do bad on LAN or anything like that, but there's definitely the idea within the community that not him necessarily, but just some people in general who we haven't seen on LAN might not perform as well as they have online. So that's going to be a major storyline heading into the major, but we can talk about that more at that time.
Yep. I believe Slack called him out last season because that was the big jump off point. So let's talk about these 10 matches this week. We've gotten to see some of these teams with their new rosters. That was one of my biggest complaints about previewing week 1 is that we have absolutely no idea how 80% of these teams will play with their different rosters. But now we've seen at least 3 matches from every single team in the league, 4 matches in some of these teams' cases. So they go into the final week. This will determine stage 4 major seeding. So for the top 3 teams in each group, they will go into the winners bracket, and the bottom 3 teams from each group, they will begin in the losers bracket. And obviously the major is on LAN, so that's even better reason to just get another win under your belt. You can have a little bit of an advantage, and if you're really confident that like teams are filled with warriors and your team's not, then maybe start in the winners bracket. You don't have to deal with all the screwery that will be in the losers bracket. So let's start on Thursday. What are you saying?
I was just gonna say real quick, I think regardless of that advantage in the winners bracket, just getting top 3 in your group is more of an incentive this time because it's the first LAN in over a year. That means you're like, if you finish in the bottom 3, there's a possibility where you only get to play 1 match on LAN, right? Like by being in the top 3, you're guaranteeing you play at least 2.
Yeah.
So I know that's minuscule, but it's still more LAN practice on this game, which could be important for those bigger tournaments down the stretch. All I want to say.
Yeah, and I mean I don't know if they played on PCs on LAN last year for the CDL, but this is the first Call of Duty title that has been played. Pretty much every pro is on their PC now. They're not on PS4, PS5, Xbox, or whatever. So I don't know if they're you never know what kind of issues there will be with a LAN event. Even with like a closed set where there won't be fans and everything, I just think about UMG South Carolina in what was that, Black Ops 3, where everybody figured out that Bluetooth was actually a big problem for Call of Duty. So hopefully nothing like that happens, but you never know. Let's start off with Toronto versus so the first 2 matches of the week: Toronto versus LAG and Optic Chicago versus the Seattle Surge. At least for me, I mean, this is pretty straightforward, LAG and Optic. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think we really have to spend too much time on this. I'm obviously going Toronto and Optic, but
there we go.
Yeah.
I was seeing if I could slip it by you. Yeah, so I don't think
you almost did.
There's not too much to disagree with, just because, I mean, why would you pick Seattle at this point? 10 straight losses. Optic, maybe at their very, very worst this season, you could say at least there's a shot for Seattle. There's an opening there. But Optic seems to have turned a corner since they were struggling, and Toronto looks to be one of the best teams. And despite what I may think, the Gorillas just haven't, even at their best, they haven't looked like they can beat a team like Toronto, at least consistently. Obviously, anything can happen, once, and there's a shot that the Gorillas pull off like a Logan Paul upset over Floyd or something, but there's really not a very likely chance that happens. So those two matches, and then we have two more on Friday: the Subliners versus the Royal Ravens, and the Los Angeles Thieves versus the Minnesota Rocker. I mean, that Subliners Ravens match, like, there's not really a whole lot to talk about, considering New York is currently the first seed in Group B, and London, I believe, is tied for last in Group B. But that Thieves versus Rocker match, we talked about a little bit about it earlier, but this could be the decider for who finishes third and who finishes fourth in this group. So who do you got?
I think it should at least worth noticing or mentioning for New York London that London was the only team to beat New York in Stage 3 group play. That was a pretty big upset. Obviously, it's a different London team now, and for that match, I would have predicted New York, and for this one, I'm going to predict New York, but it's definitely something to just keep in the very deep back of your mind. There might be some upset potential here, but I think New York should be able to beat London. But yeah, the Thieves Minnesota is going to be a big one. Minnesota right now 2-1, Thieves at 1-2. So if the Thieves win, they'll be tied at 2-2. Both teams will be 2-2, and the Thieves would have that tiebreaker, which would be huge. But obviously, if Minnesota wins, they would just be 3-1. Thieves would be 1-3, and it would kind of, almost, well, probably wouldn't be 100% locked in, but would be, probably like 90% locking in Minnesota for a winner's bracket spot. So it's definitely a big match. I'm going to go with Minnesota just based off recent performances. But obviously this is one I could see go either way. And I will definitely be excited to watch it regardless of what happens. But yeah, I'll pick Minnesota.
I believe that if Minnesota wins this match, and then it would take if Optic somehow lost to Seattle, that would be the opening that the Thieves would need. Because if Optic and Minnesota win, then the top three will be Atlanta, Optic, and Minnesota in some fashion, because they'll all have at least 3 wins, and that would lock out the Thieves, Paris, and Seattle, which is the most likely scenario, at least in my mind. I'll go with Minnesota here. I'm not too convinced that benching Kook was the right idea. I mean, I can't really say that like JCap or the team as a whole were wrong for it, because I mean that's an internal decision based on practice results and the teamwork that they saw within their team. But as an outsider and someone who thought that this was the Hook acquisition was a long-term decision, and one that regardless of immediate results they would stick with it because it was a long-term decision. I don't think that they should have made it, but at this point I still think that Minnesota, I think it'll be close. I really could see this going to a game 5, and when it gets to game 5, you never know. I think that Paris can and will pull it out. But it should be a really interesting matchup. Or not Paris, Minnesota. I just got Paris on the brain. Sorry.
Paris is winning champs.
Paris is winning champs. So let's go to these 3 matches on Saturday: the LA Gorillas versus the London Royal Ravens, the Atlanta FaZe versus the Minnesota Rocker, and the Dallas Empire versus the Florida Mutineers. So the first match of the week, or first match of the day, excuse me, are 2 of the bottom 4 teams in the league, Gorillas and the Ravens. If Toronto beat the Gorillas and the Subliners beat the Ravens, I believe that they'll both enter this match at 0-4. So somebody will definitely be getting a win here in Stage 4 group play. Who do you think that is? Do you think it's Gorillas or Ravens here?
It goes against every being in my belief to say this, but just based on knowing you're going to pick the Gorillas, I will pick London. I think Gorillas should win this matchup, and they probably will, but for the pod to be different, I will pick London.
Yeah, so I'll go with the London. No, I kid. I'll go with the Gorillas. it would not feel right if I went against the Gorillas. But
you can't ever again.
yeah, even if they're facing FaZe or something and they're 0-4 in group play and FaZe is 4-0, I still can't pick.
FaZe in group play.
Exactly. So that's why I can't go against them. Yeah, so I'll go with the Gorillas.
That's when this all started.
I just, man, I regret everything that's happened because it's made my life more difficult. This was originally a meme, and then I actually started to care what happened to the Gorillas when they played, and it's actually made my life more difficult and filled with heartbreak. So, yeah.
Like being a Browns fan.
Hey, I lived with that, but this year, or this past season, I exercised all of my demons, and I'm a very positive Browns fan now. I'm a very negative person in general, but I'm a very positive Browns fan. And I'm a very negative Los Angeles Guerrillas fan, but I believe that they will win on Saturday, June 12th against the London Royal Ravens.
Lock it in.
Yeah, it's a stone cold lock. Yeah, man, I really don't want to watch this match now. Atlanta FaZe versus the Minnesota Rocker is up next. So if Minnesota does indeed beat the Thieves the day prior, then there's a chance, I guess, that Minnesota would be competing for maybe first place, depending on how the tiebreakers shake up, because Optic also has one loss, and Minnesota does have the loss against Optic, so it would come down to like total map count between those three teams. So a win here would be huge. Obviously, if Minnesota loses, then they would still like to win and get that second win of the group stage. What do you think, Atlanta versus Minnesota?
I think this is more interesting now thinking about the Thieves Minnesota matchup, because if the Thieves beat Minnesota, then Minnesota will be 2-2 going into this tough matchup against FaZe.
Yeah.
Then there's a situation where they lose to FaZe, they're 2-3, and it's just tiebreaker heaven for that third spot, right? So this makes things more interesting for that matchup. I think FaZe should be able to win this one. Definitely picking FaZe, but yeah, I think this just now knowing that Minnesota has to play FaZe to end the group play, that puts even more pressure on them to perform against the Thieves earlier in the week.
Yeah, I'll go with Atlanta as well, but like you said, this match, regardless of the result between the Thieves and Rocker on Friday, it's going to be interesting because that's what makes week 3 in every stage interesting, because there's always some kind of situation in regards to tiebreakers or just overall standings. Because, man, if Minnesota can pick up a win against the Thieves, and then it's really like there's nothing to lose. Like at minimum, you will have that third seed in your group, and you've locked up your winners bracket spot. If it comes down to the Atlanta match, then you're just like, all right, like let's go and try to beat them. Like if we beat them, then we really could get first seed in this entire group. I think it'll be really interesting regardless of the outcome. But yeah, I think Atlanta, it's just really hard to pick against them at this point where they're just stomping everybody. So yeah, Atlanta, I'll say 3-1 in this. And then the final match of Saturday, Dallas versus Florida. Before Dallas's close call with New York and their 3-0 win over, who'd they just win 3-0 over? They won it over.
Boys.
Oh yeah, Gorillas. I try to block out those memories. They're not very good for me. But Dallas, before those matches, you wouldn't really think anything of this match, especially with how well Florida has been playing. But Florida's coming off a loss they're coming off a win, excuse me. I don't think I can talk anymore. Yeah, so they beat Los Angeles Guerrillas. So that's interesting. They both lost to New York, and they both beat Guerrillas that last week. So it should be interesting. What do you think of Florida versus Dallas?
I think you hit the nail on the head. In my mind, I'm still picking Florida to win this one. but just based off of that performance for Dallas against New York, this should be closer than I would have initially expected. So, if Buzzcut Shotzi goes, nuclear MVP form, and Big Wake isn't doing Big Wake things, then, maybe Dallas comes away with the win. But outside of that, I'm going to lean Florida here.
I'm going to go with Dallas on this one. I think that it's a really close call for this matchup just because it's more of a momentum thing, and that Florida, if they were coming in off of, say, 3 or 4 consecutive wins, yeah, I would say Florida has the confidence. They maybe they would lose just because they're like trying to try out things or something like that. But in this case, I think Dallas, they've maybe found something with Vivid, because it's really hard to judge a team after, even 1 or 2 matches, considering they've had limited practice and obviously limited official match experience. So maybe a match against New York, even if it's a loss, really helps them and helps them grow as a team. It's interesting, but I think Dallas comes out of this with a win, but I'm excited to see regardless of the outcome. And let's move on to the final day. Paris versus Seattle, New York versus Toronto, and Optic versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Let's start with the least interesting matchup, in my opinion, the Paris Legion versus the Seattle Surge. Neither of these teams are going to be in the winner's bracket of the Stage 4 Major, but, if they have any shot of getting out of the bottom 4, this is a match that you want to win just for the extra CDL points. So between the Legion and Surge, who do you have?
Scenario: if Paris wins this match, they'll be 2-3. So there could be some tiebreaker scenario where 2 and 3 Paris somehow gets the 3rd seed. I don't know. That's obviously, we would have to do the math and crunch the numbers to figure it out, but it's possible. And Seattle technically could too, because they're 0-3 and they play against Optic and Paris. So if Seattle beats Optic and Paris, there has to be some potential way for them to get into the winners bracket. So it's not completely chalked, but it's looking like it's chalked. Regardless, I think Paris wins this one. Seattle's struggling too much, and I don't even really know what to say. I just think it's not like the Gorillas and London where they're both winless. We just saw Paris take down Thieves, which is in the middle of the pack team right now. So that's like could be a confidence booster for them to help them, get a win here over a not middle of the pack team. So I'm going to pick Paris to win this one. Maybe Seattle pulls off a surprising win, shocks a couple people. It would definitely be good for the Seattle camp to finally, end that losing streak, but not really sure if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Paris. I'm not going to pick Seattle until they can win control, at least once. But, it could happen, but I just don't see it happening. But Paris is, of all teams, like a good opportunity for Seattle. Paris is still trying to figure out things of their own with their roster, with Temp and Zaptius. But, man, it's going to be difficult. Just, at this point, it's maybe more of a mental thing of, what can we do with this roster? What can we do with this organization, just because we've tried different rosters, within this season, within last season, and things just haven't been working out. It's going to be interesting for Seattle, and I pray for all of those Surge fans that they're like the old Browns fans. They have to deal with mediocrity and just misery every weekend. So, condolences.
Shout out Tom in the chat. He's picking Seattle 3-0 here.
I don't know about that, but okay. Big Teddy Rex fan in the chat apparently. New York Subliners versus the Toronto Ultra.
He's not even.
Oh, is he? Isn't he still with them?
I don't think so.
Oh well, I don't really know what to say then. Subliners versus Ultra. This is obviously a really big match. You would suspect that the two of these these two teams are some of the best in the entire league, and it really will decide most likely who gets that top spot in the group. Obviously, tiebreakers are still a factor, and Florida can tie with them, which will cause some chaos if Toronto ends up winning this match and their previous match, and New York finishes 4-1 as well. So who do you think comes out on top here, Subliners or Ultra?
I'm gonna default to let you go first on this one. I think in my mind this is gonna be the match of the week. I think unlike last week, there's some really good matches on the schedule that will deliver intense moments. But I still think this is the matchup of the week, and I could see it going either way. So I'll let you go first, and then I will make the case for the other team to win.
All right, I think that the Subliners will come out on top here. I just have a feeling about this. Like, I think that they're maybe the two most evenly matched teams out of two teams in the league at this point, because FaZe is kind of pulled away from the rest of the pack at least a little bit, and I don't really know about Optic in terms of matching up with either of these two teams. So I'd say that New York and Toronto are very evenly matched, and it should be interesting when it comes down to the respawns, because New York has been lights out in respawn for about a month and a half at this point, and Toronto, they're able to really pick up wins in any game mode at any given time. But I just think New York will come out on top, maybe win 3-1.
Yeah. So, your prediction aside, I'm leaning towards New York to take this one. I think this goes Game 5 either way. And I think New York will take it, but just based off what we've seen recently, the recipe for success for Toronto, at least when they were going on that major spree and their dominance in Stage 3 group play, was they were really solid in search, and then recently in group play, Stage 4 group play, and even at the Stage 3 major, their search wasn't as dominant as it was when they were going on that streak of winning on like 33 straight, or it was their first S&D loss in 30 days plus or whatever it was. So regardless, the search hasn't been as good when it was, their recipe for success, and they were really, really strong in search earlier in the season. Whereas we've just seen recently with New York last week, they were able to get the job done against two, I would consider Dallas and Florida both middle of the pack teams right now. Probably Dallas a little lower since the Vivid change, but regardless, they have a lot of CDL points, room for experimentation, however you want to put it. We saw New York get 3-2 wins against those teams where they were down 1-2, and they did it in different ways, where they won both. It was both searches. They won against Florida, and then it was both hard points in Game 5. They won against Dallas. So, I guess that's more making the case for New York, but I just wanted to bring that up where my head is at with that. But I think, like I was just bringing up, if Toronto wants to win this one, it's going to come down to that Game 5 search. If they're able to steal a hard point off New York, that would obviously be huge. But in my head, for the sake of this prediction at least, Toronto's road to success is going to be most likely the two searches in control. Either way, like I mentioned before that, I think New York will probably get the job done. For the pod, I'll go with Toronto. Either way, I think this is going to be a really good match, and definitely should be the most interesting matchup of this week.
So that concludes our preview of Stage 4 Week 3. I mean, let's talk about these other two topics real quick. Just some kind of...
You're lying.
Yeah, sorry. I completely blanked on this last match, the HBR Classic. I was actually thinking about it as you were talking, and then once you got done talking, I was like, oh yeah, we just talked about Optic Thieves. So what do you think of this? Optic versus the Thieves, obviously a little bit different than the last time they met. I believe that they met sometime during stage 3 group play. It doesn't feel like that long ago that they played each other. Either way, Optic has they're not in their slump anymore. And for the Thieves, I don't know if you consider them in a slump, but they're still kind of figuring out how to work with this roster because they've moved things around in the last month and a half. So Optic versus Thieves, who do you have?
Just real quick, you said it before, and it cracked me up every time. But the HBR Classic, you didn't get that anywhere else. You came up with that yourself, right?
No, that is a Preston Byers original, trademark pending.
Okay, yeah, I think we have to get that trademark, yeah, because we got to get that trending and stuff, because that's gold. Regardless, I think that this is obviously it's an important match. Regardless of what happens with the Thieves Rocker series earlier in the week, this is going to be a defining match for, it's the last match of group play, so it's going to be important for final standing implications. But either way, it's an important match. It's worth noting that this was the match we last saw the TJ Halley 100 Thieves team or LA Thieves team play with that TJ Halley roster before they added Hook, and now we're going to get to see it again with TJ Halley back in the lineup. And the Thieves did win that matchup against Chicago back in Stage 3 group play. So they've done it before, but I'm still going to think I'll pick Optic to win this one. It wouldn't make sense for me to pick the Thieves over Optic if I think Minnesota is going to beat the Thieves. So Optic should win this iteration of the HBR Classic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Optic wins this as well. I also think that, even if the Thieves beat Minnesota, I don't think Minnesota is better than Optic. So, that win doesn't necessarily mean that they would, come out on top against Optic. And I think Optic's just a much more improved team. I think they came out better than before, as a team, like in terms of teamwork and just like, they were in a very tough spot coming to Stage 3 Major, and there was a good shot that like a bad performance there could, really hurt the team for the rest of the season, because getting, like we talked about it before, but getting 10th place and losing to the Gorillas, who at that time were maybe like 10th or 11th in the league, that's obviously not what a very successful team usually does. And a lot of those players on the Optic team are used to a lot of success, and it would just be uncharacteristic to see them have such a bad performance. But they came out and they had a really good run at the Stage 3 Major. They've looked good outside of that phase match in Stage 4 group play. So, and I don't think there's a reason to pick the Thieves coming into this match. So yeah, I'll say Optic wins this edition of the HBR Classic. I don't know how you trademark things, but
yeah, the only thing I could see happening potentially is if the Thieves come out and just like dominate, manhandle the Minnesota somehow, and they're just like really hot and riding the momentum from that win into Optic. Maybe they're able to pull this off. But outside of that, I think Optic should be able to handle business.
Yeah, there's a very real chance that Optic is coming in off of a win and the Thieves are coming in off of a loss. And, momentum is, I guess, just what you make of it. If you believe there is momentum in Call of Duty, then you think that it'll have an effect or not. But yeah, so that does it for Stage 4. So that's actually, we're done with Stage 4 group play matches. We'll obviously talk about those match results next week, and we'll preview the Stage 5 or the Stage 4 Major as well. But before we head out, let's talk about these last two topics. They're topics, I guess. They're just kind of Twitter banter and just kind of stuff to talk about here. So it was the first one is the Crimsix FormaL beef, or it's more just like, I don't know if this is actually beef, but just kind of entertainment on a Tuesday afternoon in the Call of Duty world. so Dexerto put out a tweet, and this is from, I'm assuming, like the Optic podcast, where they asked the question, "Who do you wish you dropped but
Not that
never?"
video.
Yeah, is who do you wish you dropped but never did? And Formal said Crim, and Crim never one to not respond to things. He tweeted, "Plot twist: I get dropped during the year I join MV in place of JCap. Crim sucks, still wins champs. Hold that, Jack Black." Just a classic Crim tweet, and just a lot of banter back and forth. And Formal basically just came back at him about like his previous performance at champs and everything, and Krim called him out and said that Formal didn't split his champs MVP payment, so I guess you get a bonus if you win champs MVP, and Formal did so when Optic won champs, I believe in 2017 in IW. And so Krim called him out and said he didn't split it with his teammates, despite saying he did. And it was just kind of it was just kind of beef. What did you make of this? Because I saw that you were putting it in our group chat earlier.
I think, like you said, I don't know how serious they were being, or how much you want to take away from it, but it was definitely entertainment on the timeline for a Tuesday afternoon. Just so the video was from just Optic did like a truth pong game. So like the idea behind truth pong, or people who didn't see the video, is that you play, like beer pong or water pong, whatever cup pong you call it. And there's like a question under the cup. If the other team hits the cup, you have to either you answer the question under the cup. If you don't answer it, the cup gets taken out like regular. But if you do answer the cup gets to stay on the table, and the other team has to hit it again. So it's just a fun game, and I watched the whole Optic video there. There were some pretty funny questions throughout it, but this was obviously just a super entertaining one for the community, just because like Formal answered like almost at the drop of a hat. He was just like Crim BO3, and it was just like, oh snap. So it was definitely just interesting. For the champs thing, I think that was only something that happened in IW. I believe there was just like a incentive for winning MVP of IW champs that they made a part of the prize pool. I can't really remember off the top of my head. But I do remember at that time that some people were saying that if our team wins, or if you win MVP, we'll split it as a team 4 ways. I know it was at least talked about at that time. I don't really remember because it was a while ago. But yeah, so it's interesting that that's how that worked out. I don't really know. For a team game like this, I feel like it kind of makes sense on one end to split it, but at the same time, I mean, if you're Formal's champs performance in IW is legendary, people consider that peak Formal almost to an extent. So if you're frying like that, I don't really know if you have an incentive to split it other than being a good guy, if you agreed to it, whatever the situation might have been. But what would you do in that situation? If you're part of the KC Armadillos, we win champs, and you get named MVP, you splitting it with the boys, or you pocketing that shit yourself?
Well, if I'm on the Armadillos team, I'm teaming with a bunch of CEOs. They don't need any extra money, so I'll take that. I mean, I'm probably teaming with Jim, who flew us in on the private, and you and maybe I'll split it with Goach if he's on the team, and because. Well, we're two young lads trying to pay off our college debt, and he might actually need the money, but I mean he's about to be on the Olympic team or something like that, so he don't really need the money either. So maybe I keep it for myself. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I looked it up, and it says that
sure.
this is on Gamepedia, and it says that an additional $25,000 went to the MVP of the tournament. And I couldn't find it on any of the other champs pages on Gamepedia, so
yeah,
maybe it was just for this event, which just seems super odd. I think if you say that you're going to do it, and that's what Krim is seeming to indicate, he said that he doesn't really care about money, but that he just was like kind of mind blown that FormaL said he was going to split it with the teammates if he did, and then he ended up not doing it allegedly. I mean, FormaL didn't deny that or anything. He just said, "LMAO, that's your response. You should just be happy you got a free ring for literally doing mad the whole tournament." So, I mean, just banter between old teammates. Nothing to see here. Would you split it if you were
What
on
I'm
the
saying.
Armadillos?
So what I'm saying is if I am at champs and I drop like a 1.5 at champs and like you, Trem, and Jim are dropping 0.5s and I just absolutely hard carried, like I'm keeping that. But like the thing that reminds me is like United champs. Like some people made a case for like should Abizi have won MVP over Simp, and Simp Abizi. There was like some debate where like you could have seen either of them winning MVP of champs, and we don't think there was any prize money involved in that one. But if there was a situation like that where like me and you were like uh, neck and neck in stats, and it could have gone either way for MVP, I probably would be more enticed to like split it with all the boys if I wasn't absolutely putting the team on my back. But obviously we're never gonna have to find out because I don't think there's ever a situation where that happens for us.
I don't know. Maybe Jim will buy in, put the 30 million down, and get the Armadillos in. I mean, Kansas City has an open slot. There's no team there right now, so we could get the Bud Light Gaming House in KC and really really do it up in the league. I mean, maybe we'll win more controls than Seattle. You never know. We might win 4 or something.
Dude, our control was bad in the youngest Gym COD league though.
Yeah, you guys are actually.
It was real bad.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I watched maybe a handful of matches, and I was like, "Damn!" Like, at least when Jim was in his league last season, and they completely choked in the finals. Like, at least they got to the finals. There was not a lot of good vibes going around in the Armadillos team chat this season. So, I mean, but you guys didn't have me, so I mean, I'm cool, calm, and collected. I'll get you guys into grand finals every now and then. So yeah, let's talk about this one thing before we go. Aches just kind of put out I mean, this is just like classic Aches putting out a statement and then saying change my mind when I don't think anyone can ever change Aches' mind on anything. So he said league/seeding matches were the worst thing to ever happen to COD. Changed my mind. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, he put out this a while ago, but I was just
Oh, yeah.
thinking of it in the sense that I've seen other people just mention that some of these like the league online league play matches have just like I don't want to say they've been dull, but like they've just not been as exciting. Obviously, it's tough to compare like an online group play match to like the grand finals of a LAN event, right? Like that's just two
Yeah.
completely different things. But for me, like I kind of just agree with the idea that just for casual fans, it might not be as enticing to turn into just these random regular season matchups. Like that's never. It's been a part of COD, but it's it's always been about those LAN tournaments. That's always been the most important thing. So like I've aside from this Saturday when I went to the Yankees game, which might have been the first time I didn't watch the live matches for COD in years, I watch every single match every single day. And obviously I am on just like one extreme end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
But, for a casual fan, like I feel like some of these matches, like there's no reason for them to really tune in. Like, I mean, let me just look. I mean, this Sunday Paris versus Seattle, like nobody's really gonna wanna tune in to that match unless you know someone like me who's a hardcore fan, or for work reasons, whatever. Or if you're a fan of each franchise, maybe you're tuning in. But outside of that, like a casual fan isn't going to be as enticed to turn into a match like that. So I was just bringing up that Aches tweet because that's what I was thinking, that it might be something we have to we look at moving forward with the CDL is if there's a way to, get back to our roots. Obviously, it'll be exciting when we see the Stage 4 Major back on land, but um, maybe there's a world where, in like 2011, it jumps out to me because obviously that was one of my favorite years, but like the MLG circuit for that year was 5 LAN events and a national championship at the end. It wasn't champs yet. Um, is that a route that the CDL wants to go down? Probably not, because like all these other professional sports and stuff, there's a regular season and then your postseason, and you could argue about what you want to do with the regular season schedule here, but I think there's going to be a way for the CDL to want to just continue to have these regular season matches. But it could come down to a situation where the owners or even the players just like want to look at a different schedule or format. I'm not really sure what that looks like or anything like that, but it's just a talking point that I was thinking about, and we're gonna have to keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, I would say that you're definitely on the very extreme end of a fan, because just even outside of esports, you watch every single Yankees game. So you watch 162 regular season baseball games plus playoffs. So let's say you watch 175 MLB games, and that's just including the Yankees. Like, you might turn on another baseball game throughout the year.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's very extreme. Like, I'm not a baseball fan, so I can't really relate to that. But even in basketball, when the Cavs were at their peak, and LeBron basically was keeping that entire city on his back from just like complete irrelevance. Like, I never watched 82 Cleveland Cavaliers regular season games, because it's just, like, I would agree that like seeding or regular season tournaments are to an extent boring, or sometimes they lack enticing matchups. But you could say that the same thing about some of those group play events where you would have Tainted Minds and Vitality in a group. Nobody's watching that match. Like I know there are 20, 30,000 people. Those are the 20, 30,000 people that tune into those Paris versus Seattle matches. It's just, I think that we're in a online, it's completely different, because do I think that they would have done the exact same format this season if they had the ability to do LAN events? No, because I think they would have went for more traditional like tournaments. They would have done maybe what they did last year, where you have those home series events, and obviously it would be a little bit different. So maybe you could do online seeding one week, and then the next week you do a double elimination tournament, and then you take a week off, you do another, and then you keep repeating it, which probably would have been the way to go, because that would have not mirrored what they did last season, but it would have been similar, and that would have added in like an extra bit of games or something like that. I think anytime people completely say, like, one way or the other, that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to COD. It's like, no, the worst thing to ever happen to COD was going to MLG.TV, and you can't really convince me otherwise. So, like, I don't think it's the worst thing to ever happen to Call of Duty esports. But yeah, it's not the most interesting, but at the same time, there's not always going to be interesting matchups in Call of Duty. You're always going to have, bad teams, or teams that literally just don't draw interest. Enigma 6 at one time was a really good team. It didn't mean that they brought in a ton of viewers when they were playing their matches, because the teams that actually bring in a lot of viewers are the same teams that do it now are the same teams that have done it basically for the last like 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Optic, FaZe, Envy, now 100 Thieves, etc. Like, those teams with those big name players with big brands, big personalities behind them, they're the ones that really bring in any viewership and any real interest into the league. So, I'll disagree with Pat, but I think that there's a conversation to be had with like how CDL does next season, because I'm assuming that there's no restrictions in 2022. Hopefully not, because I'm not ready to do this all over again. But hopefully in next year, when there are more LAN events, we could have something similar to maybe a mixture between this season and last season, where you do essentially 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and you're traveling around the world competing for $200,000-300,000 every event. That would make the players so happy, where they could make a ton of money, play in double elimination tournaments, and still not travel every week, because I know that was a complaint that people had last season with like the initial schedule. So maybe something like that could happen. But I'm interested to see if there's a change, or if they just keep going along with it next season.
Yeah, so real quick, the thing for me was last season, obviously, all 12 teams didn't compete at every event, right? So that was like the biggest change coming to this season, was that they found a format so that every team was competing at every event. And I think that's important to continue in the next year, because it's definitely, when there were tournaments last year where Optic or the Huntsmen weren't competing, like a big chunk of the fan base wasn't tuning into those matches, and it wasn't as exciting. And there were arguments of like, X team wins this event with Y team not there, like how much does it count, or etc. Like all those arguments. Regardless, I think making sure that all the teams are at all the events is important. And I think, without putting too much thought into it, if there's no expansion next year, which I obviously want there to be expansion, but in a world where there isn't expansion next year and we still have 12 teams, I think one just like quick idea that I think of is 12 home series on LAN. So each team hosts one home series as a LAN event, and then champs. Don't know how you would space it out. Like, you would have to obviously figure it out. There would probably be like a LAN every other week or something. Something like that, but you would have to figure out a schedule to make that work. So I don't really know how logistically solid that is, but to me, that's one like alternative to these, like if people aren't as interested in the group play matches, that's one just alternative that I'm able to think of really quick. But we saw, like I just brought up, we saw the CDL is willing to make changes. We saw them move from 5v5 to 4v4 because that's what the players wanted, or the majority of the players wanted, right? And they made this format change to make sure all the teams are at all the tournaments. So I have faith that the CDL, if other people agree with the idea that these group play matches aren't as interesting to them as, having just a ton of LAN important matches, maybe there's a change, but obviously that's just, something we'll have to look out for next year.
Yeah, and I think that it's just online makes it so much worse because there is no fan interaction. And, even I know that Optic gets the biggest cheers when they're on LAN, but just like the fact that we don't even get to see the players, like, because let's say like 25% of the players don't even have their cameras on, so you don't really get to see their reaction when they win a map or they lose a map, and I think that's hard, especially for Call of Duty, where it's like Gears of War, where there's a lot of trash talk and there's a lot of reactions after games or even after S&D rounds. So I think that, not having that kind of interaction or that kind of presentation, that's a big change for Call of Duty. And I mean, maybe we could go back to more LANs. I think 12 LANs per year would be cool, because every team would get to host one. And I don't think, other than ESWC, there's not been a ton in Paris, and obviously there's not a lot of big LAN events in New York. So like a lot of big like NJ Rod stuff. So hopefully we can see some big LANs in places that we usually don't see, because the Minnesota launch weekend, the London series, the Atlanta series, even I believe the LA series, which was the last one they did, those were all cool because they were all somewhat different. And obviously the London one sticks out in people's minds because of the fans, but We'll see. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think people definitely be criticizing the CDL if nothing changes between this season and next season.
I think it's a topic that this won't be the last time we talk about it.
No.
It should, and in the off season and stuff. We'll be looking at stuff like this, but it was just a tweet that I was reminded of earlier today. And even though what we just talked about necessarily wasn't exactly what Iggs was saying in his tweet,
Yeah.
It's just like you said, an interesting topic to think about.
So that does it from us. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. Make sure to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcast. It helps us get higher in the rankings in the podcast lists. Follow us on Twitter. Bink's Twitter is at jbink with 2 Ks. I'm at presbyers. And you can follow the podcast Twitter at Ego Chall Podcast. Our next show will be on Tuesday, June 15th at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll probably be talking about the Stage 4 major preview. We'll also be covering the final 10 matches of the Stage 4 group play. The date, I guess, could change. It just depends on if the major begins on Thursday or Wednesday. Last time it was on Thursday, which coincides with all of the other weeks of play, which was helpful because we didn't have to change anything. But we don't know if that's a permanent change or if they just did it for that one major. So we'll see. Just follow us on Twitter. We'll give you updates. If it's on Monday, June 14th, or Tuesday, June 15th, we'll let you know. Either way, we'll be recapping the final week of Stage 4 group play and looking forward to the first LAN in like 16 months or something. It'll be in Dallas in front of no fans, but it'll be just refreshing to see players out of their bedrooms and on the main stage in their slippers, most likely. So that does it from me. Bink, if you have any other thoughts, then take it away.
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, remember to send the chow.